We're starting Be'ezras Hashem siman kuf nun vav and vayol moshe, and now we're going to go back and answer the question that we've been talking about in the last two simanim, which is that Shevna and Chizkiah, that the Gemara says that there was a havamina to follow Shevna because he's the roiv. Maybe Hashem will follow him and let the city be given over to Sancheriv. And the Gemara says in the end that Kesher shall Rasha'im who ve'ena min minyan, that Shevna doesn't count because they were Rasha'im. The question is, if they were Rasha'im, then why to begin with, why did Chizkiah think to follow them? But the answer to this question is, Hu b'marsha sham shekasav v'zel Rasha'im. This is the Marsha. The Marsha answers this problem. Bir ha'maimer ki Sancheriv cheref marchois elokim chaim. The Sancheriv insulted Hashem. Kamasha Omar, this is what Sancheriv said when he came to the city. Really, Sancheriv sent Rav Shakeh, I think, to go and besiege the city, and he called out insulting words against Hashem, and he said, all the other gods couldn't save their cities from me, and now your God can't save you from me either. Right? So that's what the pasuk says. Biyad malachecha cheirafta, in the representation of your representatives, your general of the army, Rav Shakeh, cheirafta, you insulted. So v'alkein, therefore Shevna v'siyasai, Shevna and his group, sheba'u lahashlimimo, that wanted to surrender, haya machshavoisem l'ra al Hashem. They were actually thinking bad about Hashem. Uki'ilu chashav la'avoid avodah zara. It was as if Shevna had in mind to do avodah zara. Even though Shevna didn't actually do it, but Hashem considers it as if he actually did it, because by avodah zara, a machshav ra, a bad thought is considered like he actually did it. In other words, since Sancheriv was the Ovid Avodah Zarah, and he wanted to claim that he's more powerful than Hashem, his Avodah Zarah is more powerful than Hashem, so going to join and give in to him is like being moida in his Avodah Zarah. Even though Shevna, of course, didn't mean that. Shevna was a tzaddik. But since that would have been the outcome, so Hashem considered it like Avodah Zarah. V'alkein, therefore, af shehu v'siyasei hayeruban shel Yisrael, even though they had the majority, ein holchim l'roa achrei roiv. We don't follow the roiv when it's wrong. Aval Shevna ta b'chol zeh. Shevna didn't do this on purpose. He wasn't a rasha. He made a mistake, an innocent mistake. So ba navi v'yamar loy. The navi came and said to him, loy soimrun kesher. L'chol asher yoymar am zeh kesher. Ki Kesher azeh shahai Elohim Sancheriv. This Kesher, the Kesher means not the conspiracy of Shevna and his people, but rather it means the connection between Shevna and Sancheriv. Ki Kesher azeh shahai Elohim Sancheriv ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu min minyan. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not going to be part of that minyan. Haroiv Shalahem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not going to count on their side. V'hainu de einoi min minyan koi al HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Einoi min minyan doesn't mean Shevna, it means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not on their side. Shehu einoi mina minyan shalahem. He's not on their side. Ki biyad malacha of cheref Elokim, because Sancheriv insulted Hashem. V'chulu. Ve'ein lecha lachush al kesher minyanam. So therefore, you Chizkiah don't have to worry about their side. Shehu arayv, because they're the majority. Because kivan she'en HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'kesher minyanam, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not on their side. Ad kan l'shoyna. Hinei bir. So you see from the Marsha, the Masha Omer B'zeh Kesher Shel Rasha'im. When it says that they're wicked, Eino Min Minyan, and they're not counted, Loi Koi Klal Siyasa Shel Shevna. It doesn't go on Shevna's people. El Masha Omer De Eino Min Minyan. This that he says is not counted. Koi Ala Kodesh Baruch Hu. She Eino Min Minyan Shel Hem. Kodesh Baruch Hu is not on their side. The Oimroi Kesher Rasha'im Hu, and the fact that it calls them Rasha'im is not Shevna. It's because they wanted to join up with Sancheriv, who insulted Hashem. That's called thinking bad about Hashem. It has the same din as thinking to do avodah zarah, that Hashem considers it like you already did it, and you're a rasha. The reason why the Marshal was forced to learn this way, not the Pashup way, is because of our question that we asked. That if you say Pashup Shat, that their Shevna was a Rasha, that the Im Rasha'im Hayu, if they were Rasha'im, Ha'eb Salfadaitach the Chizkiah Bazeh. How could Chizkiah have thought to begin with to follow that Hashem would follow that majority? But now that we have the Marsha, we see that that the Navi never called them Rasha'im. It could be Taka that Shevna was a tzaddik and all his people were tzaddikim. This thought that they had to join up with those who insulted Hashem was a thought of avodah zarah. Even though it happened through an innocent mistake that Shevna made. Shevna was there. The Marsha says that Shevna just made a mistake. Who Kesher in Hashem. It still comes out that the outcome of this mistake would have been to join up with those who insult Hashem. That's considered joining up with Rasha'im. And even after all this, it doesn't mean that Shevna wasn't part of the minyan, wasn't part of the count, that his people didn't count. Because they were tzadikim, they did count. HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't count in their minyan. He wasn't on their side. That usually, even though Hashem does follow the roiv, like by the chachamim against Rebbe Lezer, even though Rebbe Lezer was right, the chachamim were the roiv and he followed them because they were tzadikim. Mashenkin over here, if you have a roiv who are in effect not tzadikim, Hashem doesn't go on their side. Because they're coming to join up with the insulters of Hashem. The halach is not like him. Chazal say by David, Hashem is with him. The halach is like him. The Chazidim, we see from this that those are two interdependent things. The im ein Hashem imam. If Hashem's not with somebody, then ein halacha k'vasai. The halach is not like those people. So now let's take a look at the famous story of the brisker Rav, because that's the other. This is how the Satmar Rebbe learns this Gemara with Shevna and Chizkiah. Let's see how the brisker Rav learned it. Turn to page 2. Page 2 in the Maramah sheets. Yeah. And here I have a page from Mikado et Sad Hey Be'ir where you have the story of the brisker Rav told over here. I'm not going to read every word inside, but you can see that this is talking after the Knessia Gedola of Agudas Yisrael in 1937, in the summertime, after the Peel Commission proposed a partition of Eretz Yisrael to give a piece to the Zionists and a piece to the Arabs. And the end of the story was that the Zionists agreed to it and the Arabs didn't agree to it, and in the end it didn't happen. But at that time, that was the talk of the time. So they asked, the Aguda had a convention, and they asked the Moetzes Gedolah Torah to paskin on the question. So there were different people who held different things. Baron Kotler and Rebbe Elchanan Wasserman held not to do it. They held that you can't have a Medina. And there were some rebbes of Poland who did hold of it. And in the end, they came out with resolutions, we're going to see in a second, that said that there shouldn't be a Medina according to the current proposal of Peel, because it would be for Zaitika reasons. They came up with different side points that they didn't like about it. They said it's going to be a Rasha'im are going to be in power, and they're not going to let us keep the Torah, and it won't be the borders of Eretz Yisrael. They came up with like excuses why it wasn't good. They didn't say openly any Medina is Aser. So this is going to be the issue here. So take a look. It says, by the beginning of where I highlighted here, it says, V'gama Knessia Gedola asher He's kansa oz dana imuter al pidin toyer levater al chelak meretz Yisrael. Some of the people in the Knesset were discussing the subject of not whether it's allowed to have a Medina, but whether it's allowed to give up on certain areas of Eretz Yisrael. V'yashvu sham rabbanim v'admorim upilpul b'divrei toyer imuter oy aser. And some rabbanim were discussing the question of whether it's muter or aser to give up on parts of Eretz Yisrael. So Maran, Zichron Lebracha, this is the brisker Rav, was not at the Knessia. He wasn't even in the Moetzes Gedolah Torah. He was in his summer residence, Krenitz, in Poland also, but was about 2 hours away from the Knessia in Marienbad. He was very angry. He said, how could they even discuss this in the Aguda? He said, they're coming to discuss whether it's allowed to give up on Eretz Yisrael, a piece of Eretz Yisrael. To go and give up on one Jewish life is for sure aser. The Arabs aren't going to agree to this partition plan. The brisker Rav foresaw there are going to be wars. V'yargu Yisrael, they're going to kill Jews. Who knows how much blood will be spilled? V'hinei hagoyin Rabbi Avram Kalmanovitz Zatzal Gam hu yishtatet b'knesia v'kasher ba'al Maran Zal To'an loy Maran Zal ma im shlichus damim. That Rabbi Avram Kalmanovitz came after he was at the Knesset. He came to visit the brisker Rav, and the brisker Rav said to him, how could they discuss this? What about the question of Jewish lives? So Heishiv l'Maran Zal Haim Ha'em Be'emes Memshelas Anglia Mischasheves Be'ezem Mida B'Masha Machlita Knesset Gdola. He said, do you really think that the British government cares what the Knesset Gdola says? Who cares? What are you getting so upset about? So I know Maran Zal Dihinei B'Sanhedrin Daf Chavav Medalef. So the brisker Rav said, no, it does matter. Because the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, Shevna Havadarish B'Tleisa Rivavasa. And again, I'm not going to read the whole thing because
should I ask his grandson or Basher about this? About his grandfather, about the story? Maybe he would know more about it.
Yeah, well, there are enough versions of this story already. We're going to go through some of them now.
Maybe I should ask his grandson about it. If I ever run into him.
Yeah. Anyway, but the point is, the brisker Rav brought the same Gemara and he said, you see that if not for the fact that they were a Kesher shel Rasha'im, skip down a little bit, like the fifth line from the bottom now. V'harei, we see from this Gemara, the chol ha'psak hu ba'olam hazeh, that who paskins in historical events? Here, the Bezdin here on this world paskins what will happen in historical events. The gam mishi natseach ha'milchama, even the question of who will win a war, which country will win a war, zehu nifsak ba'olam hazeh. That's decided here in this world. V'lachein, ima knesia yifseku. If this Aguda convention decides shetzarich lahakim Medina, that we have to make a Jewish state, harei yakum Medina, there will be a Jewish state. Ki kesher shel Rasha'im eino min minyan zeh ein loymar aleim. We can't say that kesher shel Rasha'im eino min minyan because they're not Rasha'im. V'hinei agoyin Rabbi Chanan Zal v'agoyin Rabbi Aaron Zal roashu moish lo yavu atzah afilu l'diun. Rabbi Chanan and Rabbi Aaron Kotler didn't want this question to be even discussed. But the Chassidim and the Rebbes of Poland silenced them. They all agreed to make a state. Now this is not really accurate. We're going to get to the truth in a minute about what actually happened at the Knesset, because it's very important. People talk about this today. The only political leader of Aguda who stayed against it was Reb Moshe Blau. They didn't agree to lahachlatas to asifa, to the decision that was made. But hechlitu kulam came, but the rest of them all decided this. V'haya maran zal b'kas shavua achrei knesia. The brisker Rav was angry for a whole week after the Knesset. U'v'chodesh av tafresh tzadik zayin omar shebavada yukam. There will for sure be a Medina. Kivan shekulam pasku kain b'aknesia, because they all decided this way at the convention. Okay, and v'isbate she'ein loymar k'moy shar deis shekesher shel Rasha'im ein min minyan. You can't just dismiss the Aguda and say they're all Rasha'im and they don't count. Thus is too weit. He said that's too much to say. You can't say that they're Rasha'im. They're not.
Today you can say it.
Now, okay, so now this sefer Mikado Etzad Hey Be'ir, Tzvi Weinman, one of the Rach, goes on over here and he discusses whether it's really true that the Knesset paskin that there should be a Medina, because that's how this nusach seems to say it. So he says over here, he says, "Mi'anusach hazeh shu nusach b'chsav shel dvarim shenisru al ped nir shekilu ton agriz shehayis haskamas kulam lahakamas Medina. Be'oid minusach ha'achlatas moetzet hagdolah Torah." If you go back and look at the actual decisions of the moetzet, which, by the way, if you look on my page 7, I have in English all the decisions that the moetzet reached. I'm not going to read them now, but you can take a look at them and see from Joseph Friedenson's translation. They didn't say here that there should be a Medina. They just said that a Medina can only happen if it will be Al-Pi Torah. They didn't say, klar, there should be a Medina. They kind of like drayed out of it with side issues here. Anyway, so it's not so klar. Lo nira she'achin huchlat b'mefurish al hakamas Medina. And then he brings another version of the story from Reb Moshe Mordechai Schulzinger, and there he says that the brisker Rav brought the story of Shevna, and then he said that Lachein Choishes Ani Kol Kach Mudog Ani Sha'afal Pi Debar Li She'aser Lahakim Medina Yehudis. Even though I know for sure that it's also to make a Jewish state Al Yidei Shvichas Damim, Afilu Shel Yehudi Echad, even if it costs one life. Aval Im Roiv Shel Goanim B'Tzadikim Yachli. If the Rav of the generation Tzadikim will agree to it and decide it, then I'm afraid. But it's only if. It doesn't mean that it will happen.
But isn't that famous story that was with the brisker when he said, even if the prime minister would be Reb Chaim Reis the Chafetz Chaim? He said brisker, right?
The brisker said that. So the brisker said it's Osir,
even if the prime minister. But
his problem was that if, basically you see from all the way that they tell in the story, is that the brisker's problem was that the Knessia and the Chachmei Ador decide how Hashem will run the world in terms of like who will win, what will actually happen. Not in terms of the halacha. It doesn't mean the brisker decided, okay, if the halacha is like them, then I'm giving in to them, and it's allowed to have a state. It means to say that that's what will actually end up happening. All right. So all this is la'afuke from Reb Moshe Shmuel Shapiro, Zatzal, the famous Rosh Yeshiva Ber Yaakov in Eretz Yisrael. You ever heard of him?
Nope.
Talmud of the Brisker Rav. And in 1981, in the Aguda convention, he gave a famous speech, which I have on tape. I listened to it last night to make sure that it says what I thought it said. Reb Moshe Shmuel Shapiro said this story of the Brisker Rav, and he said basically that the story means that the Brisker Rav gave in. After he heard the Knessia Paskin to make a Medina, the Brisker Rav gave in. And he never said anything bad about the Medina afterwards, which is silly, because everybody knows that for years afterwards the brisker was storming against making a state. And that's not the way they bring the story here. And I don't know how Moshe Shmuel got this version of the story, but he says it this way. He says, like, once we have a Bezdin, a Guda, Moetzes Gedolah Torah, once they come out with something, it's Roy Binyan of Klal Yisrael, and until they come out, you could all argue. But once they come out with a psak, that's it. Hashem Imoy, Hashem Paskins like them, and that's it. That's not what the Brisker Rav said. The Brisker Rav said here that Hashem will follow it in terms of the history. Hashem will make that happen in history, but not that it's the halacha. There's a big difference between something happening in history and something being the halacha. Okay, now, just before we stop, I want to just look at one more thing, if you give me permission. Take a look. Chuvas Van Haggis or Moshe Sternbuch. He brings the same story.
He's the current head of the Chareidus.
Yeah, so he was a big Talmud of the Brisker Rav also, and he wrote down this story also. And take a look at how he brings it. He says,
he's the Tzvesh, right?
Yeah. So he says, V'lachein to'an oz. The Brisker Rav said then, V'omar harei b'knesia. This is the last 6 lines of the paragraph here. Harei b'knesia svasvu roiv gedolah ador. At this knesia, most of the gedolim were there. The Kodesh Baruch Hu noit b'asar roiv. V'harei kimu al etzem Medina. The etzem agreed to the Medina. Rak chalkui muter levater al chelkei Eretz Yisrael. They just disagreed whether it was allowed to give up on portions of Eretz Yisrael. So that was how the resolutions were drafted. They made like side points to explain why they were against the Appeal Commission, but not that they were the etzem against the state. So he says, V'Amar Oz. The Brisker Rav said then, B'shnas Tafrei Shtadik Vav. It's supposed to be Tafrei Shtadik Zayin. Chosheshani she's kaim. I am afraid that there will really be a state. Shaharei Eino Kesher Rasha'im. They're not Rasha'im, V'harei min a minyan. Ad kan shamati v'nir shametzli mipi b'noi hagoyin Rabbi Yosef Doiv Zatzal. So he heard this from the Brisker Rav's son, Rabbi Yosef there. And take a look now. What really happened at the Knesset? Who holds what? It's a very interesting historical point here. Take a look at this paragraph from Hapardes. This is a journal that was published at the time, and the author of the journal was actually there. So he was reporting on the Knesset, and he says here who held what. Take a look. B'yoim Aleph B'erev Tes Zayin Elul. He's asfu gedolei Torah lodin al shalos Medinas HaYehudim. V'lasois hachlata la'achnesia. The Moetzes got together. Asher kol einei Yisrael tzoifi yosei. Everyone was waiting for their decision. Ho'asifa haisa soyara. It was a stormy meeting. V'yishtatfu ba'asifa ho'admorim migur, the Ger Rebbe, chart cover Rebbe, Boyan, Sadiguria, Sadiger, Gedolei Rabbanim, Chavrei Moetzes Gedolei Torah. Ho'asifa dana sheva shois. The meeting went on for 7 hours. And this was there was a big war going on in this meeting. They tried to draft resolutions. And they fought over every little stroke of the pen. Harav Wasserman, that's Rabbi Chanan, Harav Cutler, Harav Rottenberg me Antwerpen, that's Mordechai Rottenberg, the author of Yad Mordechai, wrote a tshuva against the Medina. Rabbanim Czechin v'Ungar, and all the Rabbanim of Czechoslovakia and Hungary, Haya b'daitam lidchois kol hatzah al dvar hakamas Medina Yehudis. They were against any sort of proposition for a Jewish state. V'af mishnei every Yarden, and even on both sides of the Yarden. V'af im tehei benuya al yisoyes hadas. Even a religious Jewish state they were against. Why? Because that's a denial of what Mashiach is going to do. Because that's Mashiach's job, not our job. And especially since the Zionists, they were secularists, they were the ones establishing it. Sadiger, Rav Tzirlson, Nesiya Knesia, Harav Levin, Raisha, Rosh Moetzes Gedoyle Torah, Harav Sorochkin, Rav Zalman Sorochkin, Ki Efshel Haskim Lefi Chukei Torah. They held that it is possible, according to the Torah, to agree lahakamas Medina Yehudis, bechelka shel Eretz Yisrael, and part of Eretz Yisrael. Beli lichpor al yidei kach be'emunas biyas hagoyel.
Rabbi Levin, is he the one who used to visit the prisoners?
One second. I'm sorry. What? 11?
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking. I don't know what you mean. We'll talk about it later. I don't know. Anyway, so the ein lachshois. We don't have to worry. Shachafshim yirdefu b'medinas haYehudim misadas. We don't have to worry that the secularists will go and persecute Yiddishkeit there. Of course, it turned out to be wrong. We can't completely reject it. We have to just ask that they should have bigger borders. So it has to be based on religion. We have to object. Why didn't they ask us our opinion? Okay? So now, of course, Rabbi Yaakov Rosenheim, head of Aguda, said in a letter hold on just a few more minutes. He said that this whole shlita of all these people who were maskim to a state was only predicated on the fact that it would happen peacefully. That's a very, very important point. That even though those in the Aguda who were matir it were never matir what actually happened in 1948. Very, very important point. But they were matir such a thing. If it would happen peacefully, if the Arabs would just give it to us on a silver platter and we go and take it and they'll be fine.
Yeah, Cook had the same view.
Yeah. Peaceful state is mutter, but not, of course, the 1948 state. Now, take a look, one more page. This is what Kesher did with this pardes. Kesher took it and
he was a liar to begin with.
Chopped it up and left out the most important part. Take a look. This is a page from the Kadawat Tzadhei Be'ir, but he photocopies the page here from Menachem Kasher's book.
He disproved Kesher a lot of times.
Which is called Hatkufa Gdoila. Take a look. B'yoyim Aleph Be'erev Tes Zayin Elo Tafrei Shadi Zayin. Okay, he brings the whole thing. Hishtatfu b'zeh, da. Now look, u'milchama gedoyel hisna b'zeh, nischu achlatif milchama al kol kutza shel yud, ... Okay, what's the ... Rabbanei Ungar the Czech and Haya b'daitam lidchois. So he says the rabbis of Hungary and Czechoslovakia were against the state. That he permitted himself to say. But what about Rabban Kotler, Rabbi Chanan Wasserman? What about Rabbi Mordechai from Rottenburg? No, didn't want to mention them. Didn't want anybody to know they were against the state. Okay, Nachum Kasher takes out the reasons. He says, okay, they were against the Jewish state. Why? I'm not going to tell you why. Kasher is interesting, yeah? Ta'anu kenegdom, admor mi boyan, sadigar, whatever. Then he brings the other shlita. And he cut to that list a little bit too. That we could agree to a state, and ... Kitzer, he leaves out the important parts now. But take a look down here. This is also a quote from a party. This is a true quote. The parties really did say Natzchu oimrei hein, which means those in favor won the battle and the state was accepted. That's how the party writes it. But of course, we know that, look at the resolutions again on page 7, and you see that that's not really what happened. Because they didn't, I say yes to a Medina, they just said with certain conditions. Oh, I forgot, I have one more thing here to take a look at. Page 8. Sorry, I just want to show you this one thing. It's an English article from Yeshiva World, came out in 2007. during the Annapolis conference. Remember the Annapolis conference?
Yeah.
George W. Bush with
what was that about?
It was about making his roadmap to peace.
Yeah.
And he wanted the Israelis and the Palestinians to come to some kind of agreement. And basically, one of the propositions was to give up on part of Yerushalayim.
Yeah.
So, of course, there was an Aguda convention at that time in this November of 2007, and they talked about this there. And this is kind of like an echo. Interesting how you see the Aguda comes back to there. So take a look. The Novminsker Rebbe says he went to Eretz Yisrael, he met with Rav Yashiv, and he met with Rav Steinman. And here's what Rav Steinman said to him. He said, Rav Steinman spoke similarly to the Rosh Agudas Yisrael of America, saying that plans like those being floated in Israel will make things worse from a security perspective. The Rosh HaYeshiva also spoke of the importance of putting the issue on the agenda of the Aguda Convention, recounting the brisker statement some 70 years ago that while a Kesher Rasha'im has no power, stances taken by Erlich Yidden have an impact in Shemayim. So basically, he's saying the Aguda should discuss it because the brisker said, look, Kesher Rasha'im ain't a minyan, so you got it, but the Kesher Tzadikim is a minyan, so whatever the Aguda says will happen, so, the Aguda has power, let's discuss it, and let's say, don't give up Yerushalayim, because that will cause Hashem to make that happen. Isn't it ironic that he's saying the story, mamish the opposite? The brisker said, don't make a state, and he was angry for 7 days because the Aguda decided to make a state, and he said, Hashem is going to follow them. And here, Rav Shimon is saying the opposite. He's saying that if you decide not to be mevater on Yerushalayim, then Hashem will let you have your way. And that's good, according to him.